Ko Moon Young is on her way to pick up a patient named Kwan from the OK Psychiatric Hospital. Kwan is a mental patient who likes to expose his private parts to others. Moon Young makes fun of his tiny ding-dong and then puts him in her car, driving off quickly. However, on the way, Moon Gang-tae, a caregiver of the hospital, steps in front of her car to make her stop. Moon Young is speeding directly toward him, and it seems like she's about to run him over. But at the last moment she slams on the brakes. Gang-tae warns Moon Young to return the patient to the hospital, but she refuses and speeds off. Gang-tae quickly borrows his fellow nurse Nam Juri's car and starts chasing after her. Moon Young is doing all of this to get Gang-tae's attention. She's taking Kwan to his father, who is an assemblyman. Along the way, they cause chaos throughout the city. Eventually, they reach the location where Kwan's father is supposed to give a speech. Kwan gets on stage and tells everyone how his father never paid attention to him. He shares that he used to do strange things to get his father's attention, which led to his mental instability and eventual hospitalization in a psychiatric facility. He then asks how someone who couldn't even care for his own child could possibly take care of the country. Gang-tae, who had come to take Kwan back to the hospital, is left in shock, along with the rest of the audience. The police arrive to arrest Kwan, but he keeps dancing on stage while revealing the truth. This news spreads across the country, and everyone learns the truth about the assemblyman, leading people to despise him. Eventually, the police manage to arrest Kwan. At that moment, his mother slaps him and angrily asks why he always behaves this way. Instead of feeling sad, Kwan feels happy because his mother finally gave him some attention. Later, Gang-tae is called to the hospital director's office because he failed to keep the patient in the hospital. The assemblyman, who is also in the office, threatens to shut down the hospital. A flashback shows Gang-tae as a child, winning a red belt in Taekwondo. He excitedly runs home to share the good news with his mother. Unfortunately, on the same day, his older brother, Sang-tae, who is autistic, was bullied by the neighborhood kids and got injured. When Gang-tae shows his mother the red belt, she scolds him and tells him that she enrolled him in Taekwondo classes so he could protect Sang-tae. But he failed. Angered by this, Gang-tae yells that he wasn't born just to protect Sang-tae and that he belongs to himself, not anyone else. In a fit of rage, he wishes his older brother were dead and throws his belt away before running off. Sang-tae picks up the belt and runs after Gang-tae to give it back to him. They end up near a glacier, where everything is covered in snow. Sang-tae hands Gang-tae the belt and tells him to take care of it. Gang-tae puts off his anger, and he accepts the belt. They then start playing in the snow, but as they play, the ice beneath Sang-tae melts, and he begins to drown in the freezing water. Instead of helping him, Gang-tae initially tries to run away. However, he soon realizes his mistake, turns back, and jumps into the freezing water to save him. Sang-tae, now in shock, doesn't look back as Gang-tae starts to drown. Meanwhile, Moon Young is sitting nearby, watching everything unfold. She's plucking petals from a flower, trying to decide whether or not she should help. Even though she doesn't come to a clear answer, she still decides to help Gang-tae. She throws a large piece of ice into the water, and with its help, Gang-tae manages to save himself. He thanks Moon Young, but she walks away without looking at him. Gang-tae has now fallen in love with her. He brings her flowers, but due to Moon Young's antisocial personality, she doesn't respond to his love the way he hopes. Instead, she cruelly rips apart a butterfly in front of him, trying to scare him, and asks if he could still love her after seeing that. Gang-tae becomes frightened and runs away. Now, 20 years have passed. Moon Young has become a very famous writer with thousands of fans. Even Gang-tae's brother, Sang-tae, is a big fan of hers and waits in line to get her autograph. Meanwhile, Gang-tae tries to avoid being seen by Moon Young, but she spots him in the crowd. On the other hand, Sang-tae notices a child holding a dinosaur toy and becomes immediately drawn to it. Sang-tae is very interested in dinosaurs and starts loudly explaining all the details about the toy. However, the child's father, wanting to keep his child away from Sang-tae, pushes him. This catches the attention of everyone around. The man then grabs Sang-tae by the hair, which triggers Sang-tae to scream loudly. This reaction is linked to a traumatic memory from his past. Hearing his brother's screams, Gang-tae rushes over to help, placing his jacket over Sang-tae and comforting him by saying that everything is okay and there's no need to worry. Just then, Moon Young also arrives and confronts the child's father, asking why he did that. The man responds that Sang-tae was making too much noise. In response, Moon Young grabs the man by the hair, causing him to scream as well. She then points out that anyone would make noise if someone grabbed their hair like that. She even silences the man's wife when she tries to intervene. This incident makes the news, with reports stating that Moon Young attacked her fans, leading to her being trolled on social media. However, Moon-young doesn't care about that and continues to stare intently at Gang-tae. Later, Sang-tae, deeply shaken, hides in a room and starts crying. Outside, Gang-tae and Moon-young wait for him to calm down. Gang-tae tells Moon-young that she didn't need to get involved in this matter. Moon-young responds that it was her duty because those people were causing violence at her book signing event. She then mentions that she feels like she has seen Gang-tae somewhere before but can't remember when. Gang-tae remains silent, not responding to her comment. Meanwhile, one of Moon-young's book editors approaches Gang-tae and whispers in his ear, warning him to stay away from her, as she will only bring him ruin. Moon-young overhears this and gets agitated. She tries to go after the editor, but Gang-tae grabs her hand and urges her to control her anger. Moon-young retorts that he has no authority over her and then runs after the editor. Downstairs, Moon-young catches up with the editor and asks him what his problem is. The editor, with a smirk, tells her that he finds money boring now, and if she wants him to continue editing her books, she will have to start a sexual relationship with him. Furious, Moon-young pulls a pen from his pocket and is about to stab him in the neck, but she remembers Gang-tae's words and stops herself. Instead, she gives the man a slight shove, causing him to fall down several flights of stairs, breaking his neck. An ambulance arrives to take the man away. When Moon-young returns, Gang-tae holds her from behind and instructs her to take deep breaths. He then tells her to cross her arms and place her hands on her shoulders, breathing deeply to help her control her anger. However, she then begins to seduce Gang-tae, and she suddenly feels a surge of emotions toward him. It seems as if a hidden memory from her past has resurfaced, but she can't quite understand why she feels this way. She asks him why he doesn't join her team, to which he responds that he has many other responsibilities and can't do it. It seems like Gang-tae is trying to avoid her, but this very avoidance only increases Moon-young's attraction toward him. Later, Moon-young assigns her assistant art director, Yoo Seung-jae, the task of digging up all the information she can find on Gang-tae. Through this, she discovers that Gang-tae works as a caregiver at a psychiatric hospital in Seongjin City, a small city neighboring Seoul. Determined to see him, Moon-young travels all the way from Seoul to Seongjin. Gang-tae is changing in the locker room when Moon-young sneaks up behind him. As she watches his body, she becomes even more captivated by him. Gang-tae quickly grabs her and takes her outside, but just as they exit, Juri, who also works at the hospital, sees them together. Juri has a crush on Gang-tae, and seeing them together makes her furious inside. To provoke Juri further, Moon-young places her hand on Gang-tae's body, but Gang-tae quickly pulls away. After Gang-tae's shift ends, Moon-young offers him a ride home in her car, but he declines, saying he will take the local bus instead. Moon-young, not one to back down easily, warns him that next time she'll take him by force if necessary. A few days later, in an effort to stay close to Gang-tae, Moon-young decides to leave her writing career behind and takes up a job as a lecturer at OK Psychiatric Hospital. Her job involves giving mental training to the patients through storytelling. During one of her sessions, she asks the patients what they think the meaning of fairy tales is. The patients respond that fairy tales are just meant to entertain and distract people. Moon-young, however, challenges this notion by saying that fairy tales are actually cruel fantasies that paradoxically illustrate the brutality and violence of the world. She emphasizes that true happiness can only be found by facing reality head-on. The patients, who are initially shocked by her unorthodox views, end up being impressed by her perspective and begin to admire her for giving them a new way to think. After the lecture, Gang-tae approaches Moon-young and asks if she really believes that fear can only be conquered by facing the truth. Instead of answering directly, Moon-young turns the question back on him, wondering what fear he is trying to overcome. Gang-tae says nothing in response and quietly walks away. Unwilling to let it go, Moon-young follows him, remarking that, although he seems tough on the outside, she knows he's soft inside, a quality she finds very appealing. Gang-tae remains silent, avoiding her words. She then brings up a dream she had about him, where he was showing her the relaxation technique he taught her earlier, even embracing her as he explained it. Frustrated, Gang-tae tells her to stop talking and questions what kind of thoughts she's having. With her usual mischievous tone, Moon-young teases him loudly, asking if he wants to sleep with her, which causes everyone around them to laugh. Gang-tae, now visibly upset, grabs her and pulls her into a private room, demanding to know what her problem is and telling her to leave him alone, warning that she won't get anything from him. Moon-young, undeterred, calls him a hypocrite, claiming she knows he has feelings for her but is too scared to show them. She warns him that if he continues to live in fear, he'll never truly live, and then she walks away. As she's leaving, she catches sight of her father, Ko Dae-hwan, sitting in his wheelchair in the hospital where he's been for more than a decade. His presence startles her, but she quickly brushes it off and walks past him without acknowledgement. On her way out, Sun Beol stops her, reminding her that if she works at the hospital, it's her responsibility to care for her father as well. Moon Young, unfazed, dismisses the concern, saying it doesn't matter to her, and leaves without a second thought. Later, Gang Tae takes Sang Tai to director Oh Ji-won, who conducts his psychological assessment. He also reviews the drawings that Sang Tai has made, gaining some insight into his state of mind. Oh Ji-won then tells Sang Tai to paint a beautiful mural on one of the hospital walls, offering him a reward in return. Sang Tai agrees but demands payment for his work. Ji-won promises that the better the painting, the higher the reward he will receive. At night, Sang Tai opens his small piggy bank, carefully saving up money. Curious, Gang Tae asks why he's collecting so much money. Sang Tai reveals that he's saving to buy an RV for the two of them, so that they don't have to worry about moving to a new city every year. This desire stems from Sang Tai's past trauma, which haunts him every spring. The trauma is connected to their mother's murder, which has stuck deeply in Sang Tai's memory. He was the only one with their mother when she was killed, but he can't remember who did it. The only thing he clearly remembers is that a butterfly was involved, and it has since become a symbol of his fear. To try to escape this fear, Sang Tai and Gang Tae move to different cities every spring, hoping to avoid seeing the butterfly. Gang Tae hugs Sang Tai and cries, promising that they will overcome this trauma together. The next day, Moon Young forcefully makes Gang Tae get into her car. After driving for a short distance, Gang Tae steps out of the car, intending to walk back on his own. As he leaves, Moon Young stops him and finally confesses her feelings, saying, "I love you." Gang Tae continues to walk away, ignoring her confession, but Moon Young persistently repeats, "I love you," as if she's making a joke out of it. That night, Moon Young returns to her home, a mansion built by her father in the middle of a forest. Her father had constructed the mansion years ago to provide a peaceful environment for Moon Young's mother, who was also a writer, so she could write in solitude. However, the mansion has been abandoned for over 20 years and now stands in ruins. As Moon Young arrives, her publisher, the CEO of Sangsang Esang Publishing Company, Lee Song-in, is there waiting for her. Afterwards, Song-in asks Moon Young why she hasn't resumed writing books and what has happened to her. He insists that she must return to Seoul to continue her new book, warning that without her, both he and his company will face bankruptcy. Moon Young responds that she has no interest in writing at the moment and is preoccupied with other work. That night, Moon Young dreams of her mother brushing her hair, appearing quite frightening to her. In the dream, she sees blood flowing from the basement door and discovers her mother's dead body lying on the floor. This vision makes Moon Young feel as though her mother's spirit still lingers in the house. The next day, Sang Tai takes photos of beautiful scenery and starts working on his painting. Moon Young arrives unexpectedly, surprising Sang Tai, who is delighted to see his favorite writer. He starts taking selfies with her. Ju Ri questions Moon Young about her presence, noting that she doesn't have classes that day. Moon Young explains that she came just to see Gang Tae. As Moon Young admires Sang Tai's artwork, he asks her for money, but she declines to provide it at that moment. Playfully, Moon Young tries to tug on Sang Tai's hair, but Gang Tae intervenes, holding her hand and instructing her to stay away from his brother. He then scolds Sang Tai for sitting beside Moon Young and orders him to never meet her again. Moon Young then notices a slap mark on Gang Tae's face, which worries her. She questions him about it, and then Gang Tae takes her aside to talk privately and reveals that the mark is from a slap by the assembly member, Kwan's father. The man has threatened to shut down the hospital due to his negligence. Gang Tae her of causing trouble and demands that she stay out of his life. He explains that she doesn't understand his struggles and calls her an empty vessel with no emotions. He rejects her and leaves, leaving Moon Young feeling deeply saddened. Moon Young tries to compose herself and decides to visit her father, fulfilling her promise to take him out. However, when she approaches him, he suddenly becomes enraged, grabs her by the neck, and accuses her of being a monster. As he chokes her, Moon Young struggles to breathe, but bystanders manage to intervene and rescue her. Despite being saved, Moon Young feels deeply heartbroken. She walks away on foot, overwhelmed by her sorrow. Gang Tae, who is on a bus, sees her from a distance. Once home, he starts reading Moon Young's book, The Zombie Kid, that Sang Tai had bought. The story is about a zombie child who was infected by a virus and turned into a zombie. Despite this, his mother does not kill him but continues to bring animals for him to eat. Eventually, a plague kills all the animals and people abandon the village. The mother stays behind to care for her son. With no food left, she cuts her own flesh to feed him. And eventually, all her limbs are severed, leaving only her torso. Before she dies, she holds her son close, and for the first time, the zombie child speaks, telling her that she is warm and beautiful. Even the heartless zombie is moved by the maternal affection. This story deeply touches Gang Tae, bringing back memories of his own mother. Overcome with emotion, he starts to cry. At that moment, his friend Jae-soo arrives and asks if he has seen Moon Young. Gang Tae suddenly realizes that Moon Young was walking back to the hospital on foot, and he immediately decides to find her. He grabs Jae-soo's bike and heads out into the rain to look for her. Eventually, he spots Moon Young walking barefoot and soaked through the rain. Without hesitation, he runs to her, takes off his jacket, and wraps it around her, hugging her. He then takes her to a nearby motel, asking for 2 separate rooms. Moon Young insists they should stay in the same room, but Gang Tae refuses. When Moon Young is asked if she has money, she admits she forgot her purse in her car. Gang Tae is upset, questioning why she isn't taking better care of herself and why she's putting herself through this. In response, Moon Young flirts with him again, asking why he cares so much about her and if he might be in love with her. Gang Tae is taken aback and embarrassed by her bold question. He then asks the motel owner for the price of a single room and learns that it costs 50,000 won. While searching for his wallet, Gang Tae realizes he has left it behind. Moon Young, frustrated, scolds him for being so careless. She suggests he should drive the bike again and find another place. With no other choice, Gang Tae takes Moon Young to his home, which is actually the house of Ju-ri's mother, Kang Soon-deok. He lives on the first floor on a modest rent. When Moon Young sees the state of the house, she questions how Gang Tae manages to live in such a small space. Gang Tae explains that her presence there must remain a secret, and that he brought her there out of moral obligation, not for any romantic reasons. Gang Tae tells Moon Young to rest for the night and leave first thing in the morning. Despite his repeated refusals, Moon Young tries to flirt with him. Gang Tae becomes increasingly frustrated and scolds her, asking her to stop. Meanwhile, Sang Tae is deeply upset because Gang Tae shouted at him. He continues hitting his head against the wall in sadness. Gang Tae, feeling guilty, tries to calm him down, apologizes for his outburst, and asks for forgiveness. Gang Tae then goes downstairs to bring food. Soon-deok invites him to eat with them, but Gang Tae says he's not feeling well and will eat in his room. He brings the food to Moon Young, who enjoys the meal. Despite Gang Tae's attempts to maintain boundaries, Moon Young continues to make sexual advances, which he firmly rejects. Jae-soo arrives and, seeing the situation, Gang Tae forces him to leave to avoid any disturbances. Jae-soo is suspicious, but ultimately departs. Throughout the night, Moon Young tries to seduce Gang Tae, but he repeatedly pushes her away. In the morning, as Moon Young watches the sunrise, Ju-ri arrives and is shocked to find her there. She questions Moon Young about her presence, and Moon Young explains that she stayed the night with Gang Tae. Ju-ri, upset, confronts Moon Young, leading to a heated argument. Ju-ri then slaps Moon Young, who retaliates by grabbing Ju-ri's hair. The fight escalates, drawing Gang Tae's attention. He intervenes, telling Moon Young to leave. Moon Young, furious, demands to know why Gang Tae didn't stop Ju-ri and why she has to leave. Gang Tae tells her that their relationship must end here, and gives her money for the return journey. Moon Young rejects the money and throws it away, expressing her frustration. Ju-ri then cries to her mother, Soon-deok, about how Gang Tae is treating her. Soon-deok reassures Ju-ri, telling her not to worry, and that Gang Tae isn't genuinely interested in Moon Young. She encourages Ju-ri to remain hopeful, and assures her that things will work out. The next day, Song Tae starts painting the wall at the hospital when director Oh Ji-wong approaches him and suggests that he include butterflies in his artwork. However, Sang Tae is terrified of butterflies and refuses, saying he would never draw them. Despite his refusal, director Oh insists multiple times. This angers Sang Tae, and he lashes out, chasing director Oh around the hospital. Everyone in the hospital enjoys this humorous scene. As the day progresses at sunset, Gang Tae and Ju-ri stand on the hospital rooftop, watching the sunset. Gang Tae tells Ju-ri not to have too many expectations from him because he's uncertain about his future, whether he'll quit his job or leave the city. Ju-ri, understanding his situation, reminds him that she knows he has changed cities many times before, and despite everything, she's always followed him. She admits she knows he may leave again but asks him to at least allow her to like him while he is still there. Later, Moon Young visits Sang Tae and praises his drawing skills, offering him a job as an illustrator for her books. Sang Tae agrees, and Moon Young takes him to her mansion. Sang Tae is impressed by the grandeur of the mansion, and Moon Young makes him sign a handwritten agreement, officially hiring him as her lead designer. Meanwhile, Gang Tae becomes worried when he can't find Sang Tae at the hospital. A staff member informs him that Moon Young has taken Sang Tae with her. Gang Tae calls Moon Young, demanding to know where Sang Tae is. Moon Young gives him her mansion's address, but Gang Tae already knows where it is. A flashback is shown from 20 years earlier, When Gang Tae brought flowers for Moon Young, she was happy to see him but was stopped by her mother before she could accept the flowers. When Moon Young later went outside to pick up the flowers, she angrily stomped on them, leaving Gang Tae heartbroken. Now, 20 years later, Gang Tae enters the mansion again, and Moon Young watches him from above. As he walks inside, he starts recalling memories. He confronts Moon Young, saying that being in the house brings back old memories. Gang Tae brings up the memory of the flowers, catching Moon Young off guard. She is taken aback, realizing that Gang Tae had known who she was all along. In disbelief, she asks if he was the boy who brought her flowers 20 years ago. Gang Tae confirms that he was indeed that boy whose life she had saved. Still confused, Moon Young questions why he kept it a secret for so long and never mentioned their past. Gang Tae calmly responds that there hadn't been a need to bring it up, as he had wanted to leave that part of his life behind. Despite his intention to move on, Moon Young tries to stop him, urging him to stay. She proposes that they could work together on her books, offering a future where they and Sang Tae could collaborate. Gang Tae, however, is firm, saying that he wants to move on from the past. He insists she shouldn't try to hold him back. As Moon Young tries to stop him, she slips and nearly falls, but Gang Tae catches her. Meanwhile, Sang Tae calls out to Gang Tae from downstairs, saying that Moon Young has given him a new job. Gang Tae tells him that this isn't their home and that they need to leave. Sang Tae refuses, showing the agreement he signed. Gang Tae angrily demands it, but Sang Tae doesn't hand it over, leading to Gang Tae forcibly grabbing it and tearing it up. Sang Tae becomes furious and begins to hit Gang Tae, eventually throwing him out of the house. Moon Young intervenes and tells Sang Tae to stop, offering her hand to Gang Tae to help him up, but Gang Tae refuses and gets up on his own. Moon Young warns him that if he keeps pushing people away, he will end up all alone, but Gang Tae remains silent and leaves the mansion in despair. Upon returning home, Gang Tae looks over the torn agreement and comes to understand that Sang Tae signed the contract with Moon Young, not for financial gain, but to purchase an RV for the two of them. This heartfelt realization deeply moves Gang Tae, stirring strong emotions. Later, Sang Tae, feeling unwell, repeatedly checks to see if Gang Tae has arrived. He eventually falls asleep while waiting, and Moon Young covers him with a blanket. The next day, Lee Sang-in tries to enter her mansion, but Sang Tae refuses to let him in. Sang-in then forces his way inside but ends up falling. Moon Young asks him what he needs, and Sang-in explains that he is worried about her and wants to take her back to Seoul. Moon Young tells him she has started working on her book and that Sang Tae is now her art designer. Just then, Gang Tae arrives with all his belongings, and Moon Young is pleased to see him. Sang Tae apologizes, and Gang Tae forgives him. Moon Young shows them to their room, which Sang Tae is delighted with. The next day, both brothers clean the house and prepare a meal. Moon Young is pleasantly surprised to find the house spotless and the meal ready. Having felt lonely all her life, she is overjoyed to see the house vibrant and lively because of the brothers. She enjoys the meal they prepared. Later, the three of them return to the hospital. Moon Young is going to give lecture, Sang Tae is painting, and Gang Tae is working. The director asks Gang Tae why he is afraid of butterflies. This question triggers a memory of a killer who had a butterfly pin on her clothes, who killed his mother and left, causing Sang Tae to develop a fear of butterflies. On her way to class, Moon Young encounters a patient named Kang Yoon-ja, who believes Moon Young is her long-lost daughter who died in an accident years ago. Moon Young is shocked, as she is unsure if her mother is truly dead or alive, having been taken from the basement years ago. Yoon-ja insists Moon Young is her daughter, causing Moon Young to be momentarily stunned. Gang Tae intervenes, taking Yoon-ja outside. Despite his attempts to calm her, Yoon-ja continues to insist that Moon Young is her daughter. Moon Young, frustrated, reveals the truth that she is not her daughter, and that her daughter died in the accident. The revelation devastates Yoon-ja, causing her to faint. In a flashback, Dae Hwan is seen showing Moon Young's mother around the mansion. They all appear to be living happily, until one day, Moon Young discovers her mother's lifeless body in the basement. That night, Moon Young has a terrifying nightmare where her mother's ghost appears and threatens her, insisting that if she doesn't send the two brothers away, it will kill them. Moon Young wakes up in a panic, screaming. Gang Tae immediately rushes to her side, offering comfort. Despite her protests and her plea for him to leave for his own safety, Gang Tae refuses to go and promises to stay with her. He remains by her side all night, caring for her. When Moon Young wakes up the next morning and finds Gang Tae still there, she asks him why he is in her room. Gang Tae tells her he stayed to look after her because she wasn't feeling well during the night. While traveling on the bus, Sang Tae reads a story written by Moon Young to Gang Tae titled, The Cheerful Dog. It's about a cute dog who dreams of exploring the world, but is unable to because it's tied up. The dog lives in hope of becoming free, and one day it finally succeeds in breaking its leash. Inspired by her own story, Moon Young tries to cut her long hair, which constantly reminds her of her cruel mother. Just as she's about to cut it, she hears her mother's voice again and stops. Frustrated, she smashes a mirror in her room. Hearing the noise, Sang-in rushes in and tells her she needs to leave the house and return to Seoul before she loses her mind. He starts packing her belongings and tries to force her out. Moon Young fights back, but Sang-in remembers all her tricks and avoids getting hurt. He almost manages to get her out when Gang Tae arrives and stops him. During the chaos, Moon Young pushes Sang-in down the stairs, but Gang Tae catches him just in time and sends him away. Later, Gang Tae gives Moon Young her medicine, worried about her health after the previous night. However, Moon Young refuses, saying she doesn't want to rely on medicine, and pushes it aside. To lighten the mood, Gang Tae takes her to a restaurant. There, Moon Young starts eating raw meat, and Sang Tae tells her to wait for it to cook properly. She responds playfully, saying she is so hot that it will cook inside her. That night, they walk by a fountain in a park, and Moon Young, feeling exhausted, asks Gang Tae to carry her on his back. Embarrassed, he starts fiddling with his phone, but Moon Young grabs it and almost throws it into the lake. Just then, a call from Ju-ri comes through. Playfully, Moon Young answers it, telling Ju-ri that she and Gang Tae are on a date. Gang Tae scolds her, asking for his phone back. They spend the night teasing each other and having fun. The next day, Eunja wakes up from her coma and remembers everything clearly. She recalls the night when her daughter bought her an expensive shawl and she scolded her harshly for spending so much money. Angry and hurt, her daughter stormed out of the shop and was tragically hit by a car, dying instantly. Overwhelmed with guilt, Eunja breaks down, wishing she had acted differently as her daughter might still be alive. Seeing Eunja's regret, Gang Tae is reminded of his own mother, who used to hurt him emotionally by saying she only gave birth to him so he could take care of Sang-tae. Gang Tae, feeling emotional, asks his friend Jae-soo if his mother also regretted her acts. Jae-soo, also moved, looks up to the sky and asks Gang Tae's mother why she treated him like that. Soon-duke, who overhears this, tells Gang Tae that his mother didn't mean to be cruel. Rather, she was burdened with heavy responsibilities. Raising a special child like Sang-tae was extremely difficult, but his mother did it with great care. She advises Gang Tae to focus on the good memories of his mother, assuring him that he will find plenty of them. She then encourages him to eat, and Gang Tae, still emotional, starts eating while shedding tears. Gang Tae, still a bit intoxicated, returns to Moon Young. She's sitting in the hallway, waiting for him. He asks her to close her eyes. She thinks he's about to kiss her, but when she opens her eyes, she sees that he's holding a strange doll. He tells her he made it himself for Sang-tae a long time ago and named it Mang-tae. He says if she sleeps with the doll, it will keep bad dreams away. Moon Young happily accepts it. That night, as Gang Tae falls asleep, memories of his mother flood back. He recalls her buying him his favorite noodles, and the time he thought she only sheltered Sang-tae under her umbrella during a storm. The memory becomes clearer, and he realizes that his mother had called him also to join them under the umbrella. He also remembers her singing him lullabies and holding him close. These memories make Gang Tae realize that his mother loved him just as much as she loved Sang-tae. Overwhelmed, he hugs Sang-tae and tearfully says how much he misses their mother. Meanwhile, Moon Young sleeps soundly with Mang-tae, free from nightmares. The next day, they all return to work at the hospital. Moon Young finds out that her classes have been suspended for a few days because she had frightened Eunja. Furious, she goes to see Eunja and takes the expensive shawl that Eunja's daughter had given her before she died. Instead of feeling upset, Eunja is relieved, as Moon Young taking the shawl seems to lift a heavy burden off her shoulders. Later, Gang Tae visits Moon Young and praises her, saying he knows she took the shawl to help ease Eunja's pain. He's impressed by her kindness. He then recalls the story of the cheerful dog and tells Moon Young that she broke the chains of Eunja's past, setting her free. Later, Moon Young sees her father, who warns her that she'll meet the same fate as her mother. Moon Young responds confidently that she's different from her mother. Back at home, Moon Young finally cuts her long hair, a symbol of her past. When Gang Tae arrives, he's surprised to see her. She asks him to help finish cutting her hair. As he cuts it, Moon Young's face lights up with joy. She asks how she looks, and Gang Tae, unable to hold back, tells her she looks beautiful. Later that night, Sang-tae finds out that Moon Young has his doll, Mang-tae, and asks for it back. But Moon Young refuses, saying Gang Tae gave it to her. This leads to a playful pillow fight between them. Gang Tae comes in to break it up, but in the chaos, Mang-tae gets torn in two. Angry, Moon Young storms off. Gang Tae tries to comfort Sang-tae, explaining that he doesn't need the doll because Gang Tae is always there for him. He asks Sang Tae if he wants Gang Tae or Mang Tae, to which Sang Tae replies that he wants Gang Tae. He finally agrees to give the doll to Moon Young. Gang Tae stitches Mang Tae back together and hands it to Moon Young, saying it's now hers for good. However, Moon Young replies that she doesn't want Mang Tae, she wants Gang Tae. She then rests her head on his lap and falls asleep. Gang Tae gently places the doll in her hands and lovingly covers her with a blanket. He starts to feel his growing affection for Moon Young, but finds himself unable to express it. The next day, Moon Young, Gang Tae, and Sang Tae head to the hospital for work, where they run into Ju Ri and Soondeok. Soondeok, who now works as a chef at the hospital, invites them all to dinner. Moon Young agrees and, to tease Ju Ri, links arms with Gang Tae, making Ju Ri jealous. Even Sang Tae doesn't like this display of affection and steps between them, grabbing both their arms. Later, Moon Young gives a lecture where she discusses the story of Beauty and the Beast, explaining that it's not a love story, but a case of Stockholm Syndrome, where the captive falls in love with their captor. However, one of the patients, Julie, disagrees and says it's a story about love. She emphasizes that love is essential and without it, nothing else matters. Julie becomes emotional, and her words deeply affect Moon Young as well. After the lecture, Moon Young steps outside to smoke. Julie's ex-husband, an alcoholic who used to abuse her, arrives, begging for forgiveness and promising not to hurt her again. Julie refuses, saying she's in love with someone else now. Enraged, her ex-husband begins to assault her. Seeing this, Moon Young throws a can at him and confronts him, demanding to know what men like him gain from hurting their wives. Furious, the man slaps Moon Young hard, causing her to fall. Just then, Gang Tae rushes in and attacks the man, beating him up. Julie asks Gang Tae to stop, and he does, but by then, the hospital staff has witnessed the whole scene. Moon Young is impressed by Gang Tae's bravery. He gently touches her face and asks if she's okay. Head nurse Park Hang-ja reports Gang Tae's actions to director Oh Ji-won, accusing him of hitting a patient's relative. While Director Oh doesn't want to fire Gang Tae, he's forced to do so due to the situation. Instead of being upset, Gang Tae feels a sense of relief, as if he's been freed.